To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Lona Spisso is a combat veteran, former military officer, and highly sought-after executive coach. She empowers high-impact, high-leverage individuals devoted to make a difference by harnessing their natural influence and authenticity so that they can motivate and inspire teams to reach peak performance while creating a sustainable work-life balance. With 2 decades working in the private, corporate, and professional sports industries in both the United States and Canada, Lona's coaching method has proven effective from the battlefield to the boardroom. She holds a Master's of Social Work from Nazareth College in New York and a Bachelor's of Science of Psychology from St. John Fisher College. Lona is very passionate about the veteran community and volunteers with several foundations that serve special operations veterans and their families. I'm just thrilled she's here to share her insights with us today. Lona, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here today. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I heard you and saw you on other people's podcasts, and I'm like, okay, she's good. I need to have her. You got insights. And so our audience is interested in hearing anything. You've got experience, insights, best practices, leadership development. As long as we're talking about that, the audience is loving it. So before we get into that, though, the intro was good, but not deep enough. So give us, I don't know, another 90 seconds. What more do we need to know about Lona?
Okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit about me, my family, my education, hobbies. Interesting fact, I am a twin. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. I was, raised in upstate New York, where I spent pretty much my entire childhood outside, playing with fish, fishing, pollywogs, crayfish, getting lost in the woods. My favorite memory as a kid was, climbing up the biggest tree and getting stuck there until my father got home, or I'd be whistling for him or screaming for him to come get me back down because, you can get back up, but you can't get back down. We're reaching for that limit's not there. All the fun stuff that most kids today don't get to experience. I'm very, very gratified that I was able to grow up in that life. And I'll tell you, my whole entire life, I've been somewhat of an empath my whole entire life. I've always been fascinated with people and watch how they interact. It's just something that I've always loved to do, which threw me into my studies with psychology and social work. When I was doing the social work, I landed working high risk. I worked with high risk children, all crisis, primarily PTSD and suicide was the history. It was hard. It was very rewarding work, but it was mentally and emotionally taxing. Going through that, I think I kind of sat back and I was like, is this what life has for me? Is this all it is? It was a little bit, I knew there was something else missing in my life. So I decided to enlist in the military. I'll just give you a real quick brief history on that. I served almost 10 years. My journey included getting my commission as an Army officer. I did several tours and 1 combat tour in Afghanistan. And I got to tell you, that was where, in the military, I really found my groove, mentoring and developing soldiers. I absolutely loved that part of my job. The paper pushing, we may talk about that with officers, right? The paper pushing piece is just part of the job, but I really love the interaction because I knew that I was going to lose these soldiers, within a certain period of time. And if I prepared them to get to that next stage in life and give them the necessary tools and skills to move forward and take with them, then I was preparing them and setting them up for success. And that was what I loved to do. So during my time in service, what I did also bring in was my compassion and empathy from my, psychology, social work time. And that paired with the structure and accountability is really what became my art of being able to motivate and influence others. And then when I decided to resign my commission and go off into the big world, I had already had my exit plan done. And, I brought my experience from the battlefield to the boardroom, and the rest is history.
Well, that's an awesome background. How many years total were you in the Army?
Almost 10 years.
10 years. Awesome.
Yeah, I loved it.
How much enlisted in commission? What was the split?
3-9 or 3-6. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So 6 years. Yeah. Yep.
So did people take you aside early on and said, listen, you have a master's degree. Why did you enlist?
Yeah. I kind of just felt that I needed to get in and figure it out first and jump in the ditch with everyone else. I didn't feel comfortable. I could have done the direct commission. Absolutely. I had the schooling, I had the education for it, but it just wasn't the route that I wanted to go. My father said I was a little bit blockheaded my whole life. So I just did it the way I wanted to. And honestly, it worked out. And I learned so much about being a soldier those first 3 years. If I had just gone in it, and people that I know several who get a direct commission and it works out for them. I know several from the academies and it worked out for them. But for my path, it just worked out that way. And I loved it. I wouldn't change anything.
No, very similar to me. I enlisted out of high school, was not a student at all. I wasn't really sure I was going to make it as a Marine. I wasn't sure I was going to get through boot camp, much less be an officer. I had no illusions, but I wouldn't trade my enlisted time for anything.
Yeah.
I loved it. And, there's, as you know, Lona, there's perspective and insights that you can only get by standing in that last rank, wasting time, waiting on the man and all of that. And so I loved it. It set me up for success. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Well, listen, we're talking about leadership. And if we were pressed for time, I met you, I said, oh, you're Lona. We're in an elevator. We're going up 35 floors. Lona, real quick, I'll never see you again. What's your philosophy on leadership? What would you tell me?
I have to tell you, I keep it really simple. The KISS method, I strive to be the kind of leader I'd want to work for. It is that simple. Yeah. And, I always say that people are your biggest asset. Treat them with dignity and respect, and you're going to build a winning culture. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Well, let me ask you the timeless question I ask everybody here. Leaders, born or made?
I love this question. And I do get a lot of people that disagree with me. And I will say that we are born with characteristics that make our leadership journey easygoing and more challenging, but 100% hands down, leaders are made.
Yeah. I agree with you. I often say this. I do think that there are people that are somehow just like musical talent or math ability or whatever. Some people I think are just born with that chip in their motherboard, so to speak, and they have natural leadership qualities. They're the kid that in first grade, even third graders will listen to. That said, if they don't grow as leaders, they fall by the wayside. And then someone who seemingly is not a natural leader at all, I believe, I'd love to get your opinion, Lona. I believe that anyone with the willingness to study, put in the reps, practical application, I think they can not only become good leaders, I think they become world-class leaders, like really good.
Yeah, honestly, one thing that I've always talked about in the past is, you can be the smartest person in the room. You can have all the degrees, all the education, all the institutional knowledge for the company that you're working with. But if you can't connect with people on an emotional level and just be that person with them, you've already lost the battle. You've lost the room. So it's not about the number of degrees and the letters after your name. It's really about your character and who you are. And walking that walk. Behavioral integrity it's my number one personal core value, and it's huge.
Yeah, mine as well. I'm sure we both got it from our families, but I'll let you talk about this. I mean, I think that the military, as you know, I was a Marine and soldier. I think that the military, I think, is the greatest pure meritocracy in America. I also think that it's probably the absolute best institution when it comes to mentoring, coaching, and developing leaders at all levels. It's just it's just baked in. Sometimes we don't even realize it's being done. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's funny because after all of my schooling, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And my father asked me, he's like, why did you go to the military? What are you doing in the military? Like that, you're not doing psychology. You're not doing social work in the military. I was an intel officer. He's like, why are you doing this? I'm like, you know what? I love what I'm doing here. And I can tell you that accountability and the structure, and I don't care who you are. I will fight and say, hire military veterans, because you know what? We come from the most diverse. We work with the most diverse populations. We are the most diverse population as a whole.
Yeah.
Look at all of the places that we've been. We can operate and build infrastructure in third world countries just like that, right? I mean, look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq, look what's happened. And all of that really comes from having great mentorship, having great leaders, having people who just know what right looks like and has that grit and fortitude just to get it done. It's not about checking a box. It's about everyone, moving forward, one mission, one fight, and getting it done.
Yeah, I love it. And I also love that saying. I just sent an email to a client company today, all their leaders. And it's one of my favorite sayings, got from the Marine Corps, but it's not the Marine Corps' own. But I said, a leader's main duty is to show others what right looks like in all that they say and do. And so I love it. And you have the unfair advantage of having been exposed to the Army and those kind of leaders. And like I explained to clients, and I'm sure you agree, the Marine Corps has its 10% for sure. I mean, I've run into some bad leaders in the Marine Corps. And so Marine Corps does not have a monopoly on good leadership. I know the Army doesn't either, but as a whole, they take people from diverse backgrounds and get their foot in the stirrup pretty quickly, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
And it's a good environment. Well, listen, on the topic of leadership, both from your Army career, but just specifically now as a high-level executive coach, dealing with it, you've worked with a lot of them. Any traits, habits, characteristics that seem that the very best, Lona, the top slice of the top 10% all seem to share in common?
Well, I can tell you, I'm gonna take it as after they've completed my coaching, where they all kind of lie, the commonalities is, they've all catapulted their careers, and they are just absolutely thriving today. Is they have a growth mindset, and they learn to trust the process, because, especially with your younger leaders that are moving into C-level positions right now, you look to your left and your right, and you start that joy peak of comparison. You start comparing yourself to everyone else and how quickly they got you there. You want to get there that quick, but if you just focus on that destination and you're not trusting the process, you miss the entire journey. And with that, you also miss all the lessons that come along the way, because God knows I did things the hard way, So if I had a mentor, 15 years ago when I started the business, gosh, it would have been so much easier, but it's okay, because it's made me a better coach. It's made me a better everything. Looking at some other traits, the leaders that I work with and the executives, they're purpose driven. They are people first, and they don't fear giving their trust and empowering. Like, empowerment is just so powerful when it comes to building those cultures of accountability and building, a highly engaged work environment. Having good boundaries, that's a tough one. A lot of the clients that I work with have a really hard time, maintaining those boundaries, whether it's work-life integration, work-life balance. I know it depends on what level you're at, where you're going to fall in there, but being able to maintain some sort of quality of life, and even self-care, putting yourself first. Some people think it's a badge of honor to lose your time off or not be able to go on a vacation. Oh, I haven't gone on vacation in 3 years. I'm like, well, that's dumb. Why would you do that? At the end of your life, you're not going to be thinking, oh gosh, I had one more report I had to get into the CFO. No, you're going to be thinking of everything that you missed out on, right? So, and I think the most important piece and trait, character, whatever you want to call it, this is just really more of a self-awareness that everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what level you are, imposter syndrome and self-sabotage, it's an irrational fear. And the only purpose of it is to keep you where you're at in limbo on that hamster wheel and not moving forward. It keeps you in that procrastination mode. And once my clients realize and understand that, because I still feel it, but I know it's irrational because there's something that's unclear for me. And that's my key to, okay, step into that fear, take action and move forward, because action is the only thing that removes fear.
Yes, well said. A lot of wisdom right there. I want to change directions a little bit. Obviously, COVID changed everything relative to some aspects of the workforce. And as you know, one of the major changes, everybody pretty much had to go remote. And Mike Etor says that, the people that are waiting for the good old days to return, they're not returning.
No.
I do think people will go back to work, but I don't think it'll ever be like it was pre-COVID, because that genie's out of the bottle, as you know, Lona. People now realize we were against remote working. We were totally remote for 2 years, and we had our best years ever. We can do this. We don't need 40,000 square feet in Manhattan. My God, we can do this, So that said, what's been your experience with it? And what advice would you give for any leaders out there that, I'm not sure about this. It was so much easier when I had everybody in the office. What would you say the feet draggers? Any advice for them?
Well, I can say that over the past couple of years, watching this pandemic and even having clients who were thrown into this work from home space. I had one client, he had a 700 square foot apartment down in Manhattan and a wife and a new baby at home. And he's an executive and he's trying to have calls. They had to move in the middle of COVID out to New Jersey because he needed an office. So, think of the stress. You have a new baby, new wife. Now you've got to uproot and move in the middle of all this whole pandemic. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses to both. But at the end of the day, if you look at it all, it's really about, really great companies will develop a solid criteria for remote versus essential. If you're an arms industry or production factory, you have to have those people in the workforce, right? There's no way that's going to be mitigated. But the key is making sure you're developing that criteria and you're not dividing into two different camps, almost like the haves and the have-nots, because the people that, are home, they're seeing the people at work. Sometimes it's better to have everyone in the room. I'm sure you've done leadership planning conferences. You want your key players in the room. Let's get it done. Let's get it focused, get it up on the wall, do whatever you got to do and move forward. But then you've got the people that are at home. And I've seen this. I've given workshops where half the people are at work on their computer monitor, dressed up regular, and the other half are still at home in their pajamas. And I'm like, holy cow. And it's okay because, whatever that work sets for their standard is fine. But you got to remember, it becomes a little bit of regret and animosity, right? Back and forth. So it's really making sure that you have the right people in the right positions. That's the biggest problem right now is when they're bringing people in, the attrition rates are so high because they're given that guarantee. Oh yeah, it's going to be a remote job. And then 2 months later, oh, guess what? I have 3 clients who quit their jobs because they're like, no, they told me it was going to be remote. Now I have to go into work. I'm not prepared to drive, 75 miles into work and look at the gas prices. So again, it's having those good conversations. I had a conversation with a good friend last week. She's a senior executive for the aerospace industry, and they had a big problem with it. It was amazing what they did. They started, the CEO said, let's do some town halls. Let's use storytelling from both the remote side and the essential side. Talk about your struggles that you're having. Talk about the small wins. And then what they also did, which I think is a great idea, and that's why I'm sharing it, is, they found ways to incentivize the people that had to go into work every day, help them with parking costs, help them with, provide a lunch or a breakfast or something like that. And then on the flip side, with the people that are still working from home, make sure they have the right technology, make sure they have the right packages so they can have connectivity, because there's nothing more frustrating in the middle of a meeting when you're like, I can't hear you. And then you're like writing on a sticky note, I still can't hear you, and that itself was such a huge curveball to everyone, especially, the older generation. We don't have to do this Zoom stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, we all kind of figured it out real quick, but there was a big learning curve for everyone. So, and it's really about just talking to your people, getting that right criteria for the job, for the mandates of what they have to do, and make a hybrid schedule, make something flexible, because I can tell you, you will lose some of your best people if they can't keep that quality of life, and keeping that open dialogue is so important. I see amazing people leaving jobs, and it blows my mind, because it's not about the money, it's about the quality of life.
Yeah, I love the answer. There's a lot to unpack there, but I want to ask your opinion on this. It's my observation in the last year or so that cutting edge companies that are really vying for talent, and as you know, talent is very hard to acquire these days. The ability to work remote is a huge value add attractor for that position. People, all else being equal, if somebody really wants to work from home, they will take a job in some cases for less money, as long as they can work from home, because to your point, it's quality of life. I can do my job. I don't need to be micromanaged. I can do my job, get the deliverables on time, do whatever the case. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. I can tell you, my sessions with my clients, I don't do on Zoom. I just have a phone call with them, because I am equally distracted by watching what's going on behind them. If they don't have a quiet space or a dog's running by, I'm like, oh, look at I love dogs, cute dog, you know what I mean? So again, it has to be what's conducive to you and your learning environment. For me, I love being across the table from someone. I love to have round table discussions. I want to see that body language. I want to see those nonverbal cues, because that, as a leader, you have to be able to recognize that. You look at your millennials. I'm a Gen Xer, so your millennials, they grew up in that limited technology. Gen Zs, they grew up with a phone in their hand, right? And that's how they communicate, and that's okay. But again, it's just finding that right balance and making sure you have the right incentives in place, and future-proofing your company. So you're not just jumping on the bandwagon for the next best idea to keep your people. You've really got to have some solid succession planning, and you have to have that 3-5 year plan out. And where is that going to go? Because, right?
Yes. Well, different generation. Touch on that. I'm sure you run into this, and here's what I run into. Well, as you know, just as a frame of reference, millennials, for the purpose of this discussion, millennials, we are calling folks that were born between 1981 and 1995, and Gen Z born between 1996 and 2010. So that means the youngest millennials and all of the Gen Zs are under 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I have executives as young as 45 years old complaining about this younger generation. And so I want to ask you some specific questions about this younger generation, specifically the youngest millennials and all of Gen Z that are entering the workforce, are already there. Do you find any difference in the character, integrity, and individual traits of these younger folks?
Yeah, it's funny, because I think as we evolve as people and as leaders, and we tend to start embracing the different qualities. But I can tell you, as far as the definitive split, right? But it's still, nothing's black and white, it's always gray. Is, millennials, they were raised during the boom, right? For them, it was like, spend money in college, you're going to get better education, better job, right? Your Gen Zs were raised during the recession. So for them, it was, save, make good investments, have financial security. So you can I see even the amount of investing that the younger generation is doing now compared to millennials. And, as far as the work family. Millennials love having that work family, the sense of family. Gen Zs are completely fine doing that independent work environment. Like you said, they'll work from anywhere. They'll work from home. They like having that freedom. Millennials, they're better focused at work. Gen Zs, they were brought up with that phone. They need that. They are so easily distracted. They thrive with distractions, and they thrive on having those constant updates. They want updates all the time. I will tell you a marked difference between the two with the Gen Zs that I do work with, because I have a few. Most of them are millennials or older, but I do have a few younger. And for them, I do not get feedback from my leader. They will tell me one thing when I'm onboarded, but then when it's time to, give me a counseling statement or tell me something I've done wrong, they can't follow up on what they said they were going to do. And they remember that. They are so sharp. This younger generation, they're ridiculously smart. They're so quick on technology, and they will remind you of every single thing that you've told them. Behavioral integrity is huge with them. They want brand loyalty. They expect it. So if they're expecting brand loyalty from just a brand, imagine what they're expecting from human beings, right? But on a similar side, they both want to create or contribute to the greater good, right? They both want career advancement. They both want fulfilling work, and they really do thrive in that motivating culture. And money, it's funny. Money is one of the things that's switching a little bit now. And I don't know if it was because of, all the stimulus and all that happened through the pandemic, but before it wasn't about the money. It was about that, am I value added? Do I feel like I'm a good fit? Do I feel like I'm appreciated? Because that is so important. If people don't feel like you care about them, they're gone. They're going to leave. But now, I think because we're coming back on hard times again, that financial incentive is there. So, and it's going to come back. It's like, I'm not big on algorithms, but I'm sure there's an algorithm out there that's kind of going to show where the curve's going to go.
Yeah, excellent. We're going to talk more about the compensation thing later, but I wanted to ask you another question. I'm 66 years old, clearly a baby boomer. There's not many of us left in corporate America, but I can tell you what motivated me, what I was willing to tolerate, long-term gratification versus short-term gratification. That was different even from your generation. Yeah. It's distinctly different from my children's generation, who are millennials born in 90, the last of the four were born in 93. The biggest thing I'm trying to get across to any leader listening to this, even a follower listening to this, is that there are differences. And I wanted to get your thought, because I have a lot of Gen X and some boomer, but mostly Gen X executives and leaders who struggle with finding the things that'll motivate Gen Z and Gen, and the rest of them. So what do you think?
I think that we tend to, because I've been this person before, we overthink everything. And if we just really break it down and look at the similarities versus those differences, because if we focus on the differences, it's just going to naturally kind of spew out of us, right? If we really focus and celebrate their similarities, right? Both generations, they want to make the world around them better. They want to thrive, and they really do want that sense of autonomy. The days of micromanaging, done. If you are a micromanaging leader, it's not going to work well. And you can see people are leaving. They're not feeling that quality of life. And part of that quality of life is your boss breathing down your neck when you're trying to get a project done. You told them you'll get it done, but they're in there. And that's leader issues as well, right? Insecurity, that kind of stuff. But really, it's make sure your team members know that you care about them. They are value added to that organization, and just get to know them as a human being, because it's not rocket science. We try to, and I'll tell you, I typically don't even like to use the terms and the labels millennials and Gen Z, because some they get very offended, and I get it. You can get into that trap of offense, but if you completely remove those labels, right? And and really just focus on, you know what, we are all giving way together. How do we make this work for all of us? It's no different than, getting thrown into my first 100 days in Afghanistan. I was drinking through a fire hose, and I had a lot of experience under my belt because holy cow, there was a lot of stuff I was dealing with. But you know what? I figured it out, and I figured it out by focusing on my strengths and focusing on putting the right people in the right positions so they would thrive and they would get their jobs done. And it was really about, I would not have known what they were like, what they were doing, what their capabilities were if I didn't know them as a human being. Yeah. So just know your people. It's so simple. Get to know your people.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's talk about a compensation related issue right now. As I talk to clients who are in charge of sales teams, sales organizations. It's like, Mike, when I was 23, right out of college, I wanted to make a lot of money. I was fired up about this and all that. And when I give the same speech that fired me up 20 years ago or 30 years ago, they're looking at me like, blah, like, yeah, cool, money's good, but I'd rather have Friday afternoons off and all of that. And I share your thoughts. I tell people, don't overthink this. I say there are still fire breathers in every generation. And so first of all, you got to have a good selection process.
Yes.
Because, that's 9/10 of the process. Recruit the person that knows the environment that you have, wants the environment, and is suited for the environment. So first of all, you're not going to make a sales guy out of a non-sales aptitude person. You're just not going to do it. Yeah. That said, what are you seeing? Do you agree that those fire breathers are out there, and that there still are in a sales role? There still are 25-year-olds that say, no, yes, I want to retire at 40. I want to knock I don't want to get a salary. I want to be the saleswoman of the year.
Yep. It's funny. I get a lot of random messaging on LinkedIn, and I had this young executive. He's like, you got any advice for a young executive? And I kept it very simple, very basic. And it was probably not the stuff that he expected me to talk about, but it was about like, learn to know your people, all that kind of stuff. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm so motivated. He goes, I'm going to go run through a brick wall right now. So yes, they do exist out there. But I think in a corporate environment, and when you're trying to bring the right people in, your talent manager, if you don't have the right talent manager helping you pull in these right pools of talent and hiring the right person for the right position, that can be the make or break of your organization. And I have seen organizations miserably fail because they brought someone in who is just from a recruiting position, like a Deco, all those temporary recruiting, they bring in recruiting. If you don't have someone that can really get their thumb on the pulse of the organization and really understand what that culture is about, that is going to be the hinge one way or another. It's funny. Look at the military. Succession planning is clockwork. We know this, right? Yeah. It's literally down to a science. And when I was first in, I would have been like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But look at, we have these pipelines of positions. We have, manning rosters, everything. They're filled out for years to come. They pretty much know when the next RIF is going to come. They know when they're going to remove people. They know when they're going to have the next call up. But the real world's not like that, right? We have to look at high performers versus high potentials. And if your team managing talent doesn't know the difference, you could end up with a huge turnover. I, for example, I worked with a production company. They did manufacturing, and, Johnny, who works on the production line, maybe outperforms everyone because he's got really good work-life balance. He leaves work off of a factory line and goes home. He's not doing work at home. There is a complete separate space there. But then all of a sudden they want to promote Johnny to shift lead. And now he's responsible of, counseling people, leading people. And all of a sudden his whole life is like in an uproar, and he starts failing. It's because maybe Johnny just wanted to stay on the production line as a team lead. You know what I mean? It's really about knowing your people and looking at that potential. If you're just looking for performance, you can get a job. I tell athletes, professional athletes, this all the time. I've done a lot of work in the NHL. Your skill will get you there. No matter what, it's going to get you there. But I can tell you, your character is going to keep you on that team, and it's going to give you longevity. Same thing with high potential. High potential leaders, high potential employees, they have emotional intelligence. They have self-awareness. They have that grit. They have that drive, and they have that determination. And they're able to self-lead and self-start. And they can also laugh at themselves when they screw up. Man, I screw up all the time. It's a daily thing for me. I'll be on the middle of a call with a client, and we'll both squirrel. And I'm like, can you bring me back? Where were we? You know what I mean? And it's okay, because I can admit that. I'm just real. I'm a real human being. I make mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
But from a works, and I digressed again. From a work standpoint, it's really, does your talent manager understand the vision of where the company is going? And if you're just looking for high performers to work on production lines, that's fine. But if you are truly looking for high potentials to fill that pipeline of succession, to have the company succeed and really catapult to the next level and blow it up the water, you've got to be able to do that the right way. And that takes planning.
Yeah, I love it. And to dovetail on that, clearly, many people in the younger slice of the working population have simply, it's a fact, they're raised in a different society than I was raised in some respects different than you've been raised in. And so society in general, academia, there's not the same degree, I'm generalizing now, Lona, there's not generally the same degree of accountability applied on people. So a lot of times, the very first time this young woman or man is actually held accountable is their initial 2 or 3 jobs. And unfortunately, as you know, some of them get their first job and get fired because it's like, look, you're not in the frat house anymore. You've been late 6 days out of the last 10. Your work is late. You look like a slob. We're going to part ways with you. We wish you luck and all of that. Yeah. Now I'm generalizing and painting the worst case scenario, obviously. Do you see any differences in accountability, their sense of accountability and sense of responsibility coming into the workforce? And whether you do or not, what's your recommendations to leaders out there? Let's just assume a young man is right out of college. He didn't have that much accountability in his family. His teachers cut him all sorts of slack. He's not used. He's an extra credit kind of guy. I can make it up. And as you know, once you get out in the business world, there's not a lot of extra credit. Ain't got time for that. What advice would you give a leader to ensure that everybody understands accountability and responsibility and trust relative to their firm?
Well, I think it's kind of twofold. It's about educating yourself. You and I was out of the house after high school. I went right to college, and I actually commuted to college, but I was supporting myself. I was self-supportive. Today, kids are staying home well until their 30s. So we have to understand that dynamic. We don't have to like it, but we have to embrace it and understand where it comes from. But I think really the biggest piece here is, personal accountability. It's very simple because it's reciprocal, right? And if you are setting the example for your people and you're doing right when people aren't looking, and you're not holding yourself to this other standard, that is setting the right example for people. But also I think onboarding is so important. It's one of those, I've worked with a lot of organizations, and they third party it out because it's easier to have someone else. You and I talked about that earlier. It's easier. Some stuff, marketing for me, I task it out because I don't like doing it. So, but I will tell you the onboarding, and I don't really even like that word, but it's a typical word in the HR world, and people know it. Onboarding is so important because if you're just getting through that, your OSHA, your sexual harassment, all that mandatory training, you really have to be able to set those expectations up right from the beginning. You have to have them out there. That means when they come in, if you're expecting, they need to know what right looks like during that onboarding process. It's not just like, oh, just come in a pair of sweatpants and people are like, oh, just be comfortable, because we also have this fear of, oh, we have to make sure they like it or they like us, because if they don't like it and they're not comfortable, then they're going to leave. Well, listen, they're going to leave one way or another. If they don't like it, it doesn't matter. But if you're not setting those expectations from the front, or they're promised things, I've had a lot of clients be promised something during that interview, and then something happens, that person leaves, or whatever happens, the policy changes, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, guess what? We're not going to be able to give you that company phone now. Well, okay, so that's a learning lesson also, right? Have your stuff in writing. But again, the accountability piece, it's so simple, but we miss so much of it because we're not setting the right examples from the front. And it's behavioral integrity, all of that, right? If you do something, you better damn well follow up and let your employees see that you are dependable and accountable and in their corner, and you're going to show up for them. That, if you can do that, they will reciprocate, because you're giving them respect. You're giving them that ability to kind of see like, hey, this is who I am.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm going to spew a little bit and get your thoughts on it. My generation was raised, I mean, all of my high school teachers were World War II veterans and all that. And, class starts at 10. It was 10. You didn't come in, 10:03, go to the principal's office. There was
on time's late. Yep.
there was no slack in that respect. So assuming that some of the younger folks haven't been raised with such a strict environment, I think what you're saying is spell out your environment during the selection process. Make sure they truly know the environment they're going to be working with. Go overboard during the selection and orientation process so that once hired, there's no surprises and they know what the standards are. Then if someone deviates, you need to get on that right away, because that means slow learner, or worse, probably maybe despite all the selection process, maybe an early indicator of a bad fit. Mm-hmm. Are we on the same wavelength on this?
Yeah, you articulated it much more eloquently than I did. But yes, we are 100%. It's really what it's all about. I mean, I even help clients. They're like, I was supposed to get this starting bonus. I'm there. It's not coming. I'm like, okay. And they're afraid to ask, right? Because people are so afraid and they tiptoe and dance around money. I'm like, okay, let's do some role playing. Let's figure this out. And I'm like, it's, to me, like, just the idea that people have to actually go back and fight for the stuff that they were promised. I'm like, gosh, it's 2022. Come on. This is not rocket science, people. Just follow through and do what you say you're going to do. It's that simple.
Yeah.
We overcomplicate.
I agree. And that leads right into the next topic. That's a big one. I find that a lot of corporate leaders, executives who are well-meaning, they're aware of the differences. And so they know, oh, these young people love technology. They love this. They don't like that. And rather than adapt some aspects of their work environment and their policies and procedures, they actually start discarding culture.
Yes.
And I tell them, no, don't do that. If your culture is longstanding, in place, it works for you, you've got the right culture, the brand awareness and all of that, absorb these people. Yes, will you have to do? Yes. Do they appreciate a foosball machine and an espresso machine? Yes, they appreciate that. Right. But that doesn't mean a work remote policy or a dress down policy. Business casual means all rigor, all discipline, and all culture goes out the window. And I see people doing that.
Yeah.
And I use the military as an example of this. I can guarantee you the Marine Corps is much different than the one I served in.
Yeah.
But I would recognize the culture for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, did some of the grooming regs change? Did some of the work policies change? Did some of just the way they operate? The tactics and weapons for sure changed. But at the heart of it, would I recognize the vast majority of the meat of that cultural skeleton? Absolutely. And so that's when I tell that to clients. Now, look, what got you here culture-wise, don't change that unless you feel you need to, but you don't let some 23-year-old unproven person come in and dictate cultural changes.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah. So, I'm an authenticity person. This is where I come from. It's the heart and soul of who I am. And I can say that, integrating teams and building culture is reciprocal, right? And the most effective when it's coming from an authentic place or a place of authenticity. And, this is what I see. You have tenured employees who've earned their stripes, right? Who've been around a long time. I tell people, look, these new guys and gals that are being hired that were hand selected to be here have just as much right to be here as you do. So we can, because as well as I do, there's that, that whole process that you have to earn it. And, in the sports world, it's, the rookies eat last. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's silly. And I can tell you, every organization is going to have their own recipe on how they build and maintain their culture and what it's about. But I can tell you, I have a few things here in my head is, hiring for the right job. So important. You have to hire for the right position. Yeah. Learning from others. If you take the opportunity to learn from others, and, even if you do mentor programs are great. And I'm not talking about a buddy program where you're shadowing someone for one day. There is no relationship building. There's no ability to build chemistry because we all know teams are built by, with chemistry between people. And taking that time to learn from others, really get crystal clear on what your vision is for the company and make sure everyone understands it and break it down to the lowest level. I always say, break it down so a 10-year-old can understand it. Because if you can, then I know you understand it. If you use all these kind of crazy words and this, fancy language and all these crazy definitions and you start stumbling, I realize it's no longer intrinsic. It's coming from an extrinsic place and you're looking for external validation from other people. Like, oh my gosh, he's so smart. Now I'm so, and I keep saying him, but him or her, whatever. It's so intimidating to even be around that person in that workplace. It's have that clear vision, have constructive meetings, constructive feedback's fine. Everyone doesn't have to agree. Healthy disagreements there's nothing wrong with that. It teaches people how to deal with adversity. Because I will say the younger generation deals with adversity completely different than we do, right? That is a marked difference. I should have brought that up earlier. And then, building those relationships, a lot of times when I have a young executive coming in, they're like, oh man, I feel like I haven't earned it. I'm working with people that have been here 10, 15 years. I don't know if I can speak up at the conference room table. I'm like, hey, listen, you've earned it. Now I'm going to challenge you to go have a cup of coffee before our next meeting. And you know what? It's something realistic. It's not hard to do. Have that conversation. So the next time you're in that meeting, you're not scared and sitting in this little shell, because that's not what you were brought in to do. You were brought in to be part of that team. And, having those relationships allows you to meld yourself into that culture. And then I can tell you when the older people with tenure that have been there see someone and a younger person trying to truly understand and build an authentic relationship, they're going to earn the respect. It's almost going to be immediately. And respect and trust, it has to be the foundation of every culture. And I can tell you, if you have that in your culture, you are going places. If you don't have trust and you don't have respect, it is absolutely going to be just one hurdle after another. I always tell leaders, you don't have to be the police officer. There's times I was an officer. There was times I had to be a police officer. Right. But I always came across as the paramedic, because if I'm not there to help someone become a solution-oriented leader to move forward, they're not going to help me. I'm just solving their problems. I don't need to be a fix-it person. I need to be able to say, yep, great idea, move forward. If you need help with it, bring me solutions. And it's also the other piece I think that's very important is the opposite of micromanaging. I've talked about it before, is autonomy. Give people autonomy to do things their way, whether it takes them 5 hours to get there or 1 hour to get there. Some people just learn different. It takes them a little bit longer, but you have to embrace where they are at their journey as well. And if they're not cutting it, right, and they're not that high performer, well, then you have to look at, maybe you hired the wrong person, but there's always retraining and there's always a way that you can get through to these people and you can get through and speak to them to bring them into the fold. That's what it's all about, is it's embracing every kind of aspect of it. I kind of went off a little bit there, but did that help?
It helped great. It's all good. And I wanted to ask your advice. If there were younger folks listening to this podcast,
yeah,
and they were joining your firm, knowing that they have a tendency, they want to be included, they want to be heard, they've got ideas. Here's what Mike would say if he was a serving executive. I'm the CEO in front of all the new hires.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, we love you. We want you here. You've earned the right to be here, but I want to talk to you. Mm-hmm. You're joining our firm. We have a culture. We're probably not going to change the culture anytime soon. But that said, we want to hear your insights on policies and procedures, because we're used to doing some of these things and you're fresh to them. And we want to hear your thoughts. Now, that said, folks, I would say just give it some time. Some things that we're going to ask you to do, KPI wise and process wise and all of that. Instead, before you tell us this 8-step process you have me doing, I think it should be 4 steps. Take notes, observe. And I think a good amount of time, after a while, you'll say, yeah, really, we need these 8 steps. But after a few months, if you're convinced that 4 steps, we want to hear you.
Yeah.
And I'm the CEO, I'm telling you, the rest of these leaders are probably going to be more ready to listen to you after 3 or 4 months than 3 or 4 days or a couple weeks.
I agree with that 100%.
Sound advice. What would you say something similar if you were addressing the new ones?
Yeah, I absolutely, I can tell you really quickly. So with the production world, right, when you have, let's call them tiger teams, they're coming in and they're training the next shift, you have shift work and you're training them how to do new things. You have a completely new, all of a sudden you have all this work, all this product. So you have a hiring frenzy, 100 new people coming in. And what happens if you're not training to standard and you're taking those shortcuts, then those new people are learning those shortcuts and they're missing valuable information along the way. Yeah. So when you say, you just try it, just give it 100 days. I agree 100%. What I would think I would just caveat in the sense that I would encourage some sort of focus group within like some of the tenured and some of the younger people, just because it's also it's gonna put them together in a group. It's going to build relationships. It's going to forge that trust and respect between each other. And it's amazing when you put a small group of people in a room and just say, hey, look, here's a problem. How can we make it better? And it's just amazing at what could come out of that little focus group. But it's not something that needs to happen all the time. I've seen people run them, every week. And like, that just gets a little monotonous, right? But maybe once a quarter or once a month. But like those little focus groups on really forcing them to talk in front of the people that are tenured there, that can be really intimidating. I've forgotten my name in a briefing before. I'm not kidding. When I was younger, right? So it's really, and also finding, just really encouraging them to just be themselves. And I think it really comes across as whoever is delivering that, is it coming from a place of authenticity? Because people know if it is or if it isn't. I can spot a fake in 10 seconds or less in a room. I just know as soon as they start talking. Yeah.
I think most people can. I don't know if you noticed, but one of my studio lights just went out.
I do see that. It's okay. I can still see it.
So half of my face is, I think I look like the Phantom of the Opera right now. But anyway, great answer. I love it. And our time is pretty much up. I wanted to ask you, I can't let you out of here, Lona, without asking you the fantasy question. You were given an opportunity to spend a day with one leader from the past.
Yeah.
Who would you choose and why?
That is a really hard one. I've met a lot of really great leaders. I've been around a lot of, all-star athletes. And I can say My faith is very strong, so I've never really idolized anyone, I didn't have a childhood hero. I played with cowboys and Indians. My dad raised us, so I was a little boy kid. But I can tell you, if I had one day and I could go back and spend it with anyone, it would be my grandmother. She was, she was the epitome of like just a Mother Teresa. And, all the lessons that she taught me when I was young. I was in my 20s when I lost her. And I don't think I even realized in my 20s, because I'm not the same person who I was back then as I am now. And just the grace that she gave people, and, the idea of forgiveness. We get stuck in this trap of offense so much every single day.
Yeah.
And, our social media, it's funny because I will kind of just sit and I'll go through things. Even on LinkedIn, it gets crazy. And you see, just because someone disagrees with someone, they have to go into this huge berating, dissertation. And I'm like, what happened to human kindness? And she literally was just the epitome of that. And, just to go back and actually let her hear me thank her, that would just thank you for all the lessons, Grandma. She was just absolutely amazing, an amazing human. She was my hero. So
I love that as well. I think it's great. And the only advice I would give you on that is, I'll relate it back to me, but it'll come back to you, is my grandparents were all immigrants from Italy. Never met my grandfathers. They were gone.
Yeah.
They died when my mom was pregnant with me.
Oh, wow.
My one grandmother didn't speak English at all. The other one, not a lot of English, and I wasn't exposed to her much. So I don't know why my grandparents came here from Italy. Were they running from something or running towards something here?
Yeah.
Don't
Probably
know
a little mixture of both.
don't know what their political views. My dad was a man of few words. We had a good guy, really good father, had a great father, but man of few words.
Yeah.
And so I have nothing from him and their parents, my grandparents, to give to my children and grandchildren. And that's a miss. That's a loss. I know they had important things to say. So my purpose in life at this point is to help leaders develop, but I want to leave a legacy. I want my great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren to read things that I wrote, to hear my views. And they may say, he's dead wrong on that one. But on this one, the old boy had it right. Yeah. And so what I will tell you is, you certainly don't look like a grandma, and you're not a grandma, but someone someday, long after you're gone, Lona, is going to want to hear your insights and experiences and thoughts. Yeah. So I'll lay that burden on you. You have to write, make videos. You have to.
I know. You know what? You are not the first person who's told me this. So when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? It's such a true saying. So
yes. Well, that's the homework I'm assigning you. Is
you know what?
Write it down.
Yep, I will do it.
So aside from that, tell us, I think people are going to want to reach out and learn more about you. Where are you on social media? How can people contact you?
Yeah, honestly, right now, the best way, my website is just it's under construction right now. It's still available, but it is going to look completely different in a few days. It's eliteleadershiptraining.com, just how it sounds. And you can find me on Instagram Instagram or LinkedIn. Lona Spisso, LONA SPISSO. So I get hundreds of messages every week. And it's funny. People are like, why would you talk to those people? I'm like, why wouldn't I? It's not always about the next contract or the next paycheck coming in. It's about, what's in your heart. And I love hearing from people. I love just hearing people's stories. It's just part of who I am. I've always been a connector of people. Yeah. And that's where what we just did, and talking to someone who gets it and who is just equally passionate about leadership and helping develop people. That's my passion in life. It truly is. Yeah.
Well, that shows through. And I think anybody that listens to this or watches the video will realize that this this woman was born for this, and she truly loves this.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So it rings through. You can't fake that authenticity. And to that end, I really thank you for your investment in time. It's been a great interview. The audience is going to love it. And selfishly, I would humbly ask that you consider coming back again someday.
Oh, I am so humbled that you actually brought me on the show. Like I said, it's funny because I used to not do podcasts because I didn't like watching myself on a video. And I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. I am who I am. And it's stepping into that fear. See, me as a coach, I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and we all have our own fears. Yeah. So until we just kind of, dive in and just do it, you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, no, I would be honored to come back on another time. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Lona. Our time is up. I know you got to get going again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.